I still remember the sound of the desert wind that night. It had a strange way of carrying silence, so heavy it felt louder than gunfire. We were driving down Route Michigan, just outside Fallujah, a place the Marines called one of the deadliest stretches of road in Iraq. Improvised explosive devices had turned it into a graveyard for convoys. Every mile was a gamble. But what I'm about to tell you wasn't about insurgents or bombs. It was something else, something none of us could explain. The convoy had 4 Humvees, engines growling low as we crawled forward. Dust clung to the windows, making the world outside look like it was drowning in sand. The gunner above me tapped the turret hatch nervously, scanning rooftops, alleys, anywhere a threat could hide. But there was nothing. No voices, no movement. Just a town that looked deserted, as if it had been abandoned years ago instead of days. Laundry still hung from broken balconies, unmoved by the breeze. A child's toy truck lay in the middle of the road, its bright plastic faded under the sun. Corporal Diaz muttered from the back seat, "Feels wrong. This place isn't empty, it's waiting." No one answered him, but he wasn't wrong. I could feel it too, like the buildings themselves were holding their breath. We rolled past a burned-out car, its frame twisted into blackened metal, and I caught sight of something in a shattered window. A figure, tall, thin, unmoving. Its face was hidden in shadow, but I swear it was watching us. "Did you see that?" I whispered to Sergeant Collins, sitting beside me. He shook his head without looking. "Eyes front. Stay sharp." But the figure didn't move, and as the convoy pushed forward, more appeared. In windows, on rooftops, behind doorways. Silent watchers. Their outlines were too still to be living people, too sharp to be tricks of the dust. The radio crackled suddenly. "Lead vehicle, hold up. We're picking up movement ahead." We stopped, tires grinding on the gravel. I leaned forward, trying to see through the windshield. That's when I noticed the street ahead, lined with shapes. Dozens of them. Men, women, children, all standing perfectly still in the road, staring at us. "Thermal says negative," the lead gunner reported. "No heat signatures." Nothing living out there, but I could see them clear as day. Hollow eyes locked on us, faces pale in the moonlight. Diaz whispered a prayer. Collins gritted his teeth and ordered, "Drive through." Now! The Humvee jolted forward, tires crunching over gravel, and as we passed through the crowd, something cold seeped into the cabin. The air smelled like burnt hair and copper. My chest tightened, and though none of them moved, I swear I felt hands brushing against the vehicle, reaching for us. When we cleared the street, I looked back. The road was empty. No figures, no faces, just dust swirling under the moon. Not one of us spoke for the rest of the ride, because deep down we knew what we had seen, and worse, we knew it wouldn't be the last time. That night was only the beginning. The desert had secrets that refused to stay buried, and Iraq would show us just how far the dead could reach. The next morning, we tried to pretend it hadn't happened. Soldiers learned quickly that silence is sometimes easier than truth, especially when truth sounds insane. Still, it lingered in every glance, every shift of the eyes when the subject came close. We cleaned weapons, checked vehicles, and drank bitter instant coffee like always. But no one mentioned the road or the figures, or the way the air had turned rotten when we drove through. Iraq in 2004 was a constant mix of boredom and terror. Most days were endless patrols under the sun, the horizon shimmering with heat like the ground itself wanted to swallow us whole. The war had no rhythm, just weeks of nothing, then sudden chaos when an IED tore a convoy apart or gunfire rained from rooftops. That chaos we understood. We trained for it. But what happened that night wasn't part of any manual. Our unit was Bravo Company, 2nd Battalion. We'd been in country for nearly 8 months by then, stationed in an old government building just outside Fallujah. The place smelled of mildew and gun oil, with sandbags piled high around the windows. At night, you could hear stray dogs fighting in the alleys, their howls echoing off the walls like ghosts. I kept a small notebook in my pocket, something my father had given me before deployment. "Write it down," he told me. "When you come home, you'll need proof for yourself that it all really happened." At first, I used it to jot down boring details. Supply runs, patrol grids, stupid jokes from the guys. But after that night on Route Michigan, I began writing about things I wasn't sure belonged in reality at all. Collins, our squad leader, was a hard man to read. He treated fear like a disease and refused to let it spread. If anyone mentioned the figures, he cut them off quick. We don't talk about shadows. We watch for ambushes. Focus on the living enemy. But Diaz wouldn't let it go. He was younger than most of us, barely 21, and his nerves always rode close to the surface. One evening, as we smoked behind the wire, he leaned toward me and whispered, "I saw one up close. A woman, her face was gray, no eyes, just holes." She was staring right at me. I tried to calm him down. It was dark. Dust plays tricks. You know that. He shook his head furiously. No, I wasn't the only one. You saw them too? Don't lie. And he was right. I had seen them. I had felt them. But admitting it out loud meant opening a door I wasn't sure we could ever close. A week later, we got orders for another patrol along the same stretch of road. The reaction was immediate. Quiet groans, curses under breath. None of us wanted to go back, but orders were orders. Before we rolled out, Collins gave his usual speech. Short, sharp, no nonsense. Eyes up, rifles ready. Don't get complacent. Watch for wires, watch the rooftops. No mistakes. We climbed into the Humvees. The air inside was stifling, smelling of sweat and gun oil. I adjusted my helmet strap, trying to ignore the way my hands trembled. The road looked the same as before, barren, lifeless, buildings hollowed out by years of war. But as we passed the same burned-out car, my heart sank. The toy truck was back in the middle of the road. The same one, same faded color, same broken wheel. I couldn't breathe for a moment. My throat tightened as I realized what it meant. Someone or something had put it back. I leaned forward to tell Collins, but the words caught in my mouth. He saw it too. I knew because his knuckles went white on the steering wheel. We didn't stop. We didn't even mention it over the radio. But every man in that convoy felt it, the way dread settled in our bones. That night, after we made it back to base without incident, Diaz cornered me again. His eyes were wide, red from lack of sleep. They're not gone. They're following us. Can't you feel it? I tried to laugh it off, but there was no humor in it. I could feel it too. The silence on that road was not just emptiness. It was presence. Watching, waiting. One of the older guys, Private First Class Harris, broke the silence later that evening while we were eating MRES by flashlight. Back home, my grandma used to talk about spirits of the battlefield. Said they never left the place they died. Maybe this desert's full of them. No one laughed at him. Not this time. From that night on, sleep came harder. Every creak of the building, every gust of wind outside made us tense. Shadows stretched longer than they should. Some of the guys swore they heard whispers in Arabic at night, faint but close, even when no one else was speaking. We told ourselves it was just nerves, just exhaustion. But deep down, each of us knew the truth. Iraq was haunted, not only by war, but by something older, something buried in its soil long before we ever arrived. And soon we would learn just how far those shadows could reach. The weeks that followed blurred together in a haze of heat, dust, and sleepless nights. By then, routine should have numbed us, but instead the sense of dread deepened. Every patrol felt heavier, as if something unseen rode with us. Even the men who prided themselves on being stone-faced started showing cracks. Diaz chewed his nails bloody. Harris prayed more than he ate. And Collins, though he would never admit it, kept his rifle within arm's reach even when shaving. Our missions took us deeper into neighborhoods that had been hollowed out by fighting. Houses stood like shells, walls pocked with bullet holes, doors swinging open to rooms filled with rubble. Children's drawings still hung on crumbling plaster. You could almost picture the families who once lived there. Almost. But the longer you stared, the more wrong everything felt, as if the life had been scraped out with a knife and replaced with silence. One afternoon, our squad swept through a school. The chalkboards were covered in Arabic phrases, some half erased, others smudged by rain seeping through holes in the roof. Rows of desks were overturned, books scattered across the floor. Diaz picked up a notebook, its pages stiff with dried blood. He didn't open it. He just set it back down slowly, like it might burn his hands. "Clear," Collins called from another room. His voice echoed in the hollow hallways. But something about the sound made my stomach twist. It was too sharp, too loud, as if bouncing off walls that weren't really there. We regrouped near the front entrance, and that's when Harris froze. He pointed toward the playground outside. "Tell me I'm not seeing that." Through the rusting swings near the crooked slide stood 3 children. Their clothes were ragged, gray with dust, and their faces too pale for the desert sun. They stared at us, unmoving, their eyes black as coal pits. "Kids?" Diaz whispered. But no, they weren't kids. They couldn't be. Something about their stillness was inhuman. Collins stepped forward, raising a hand. "Back inside." Now. We pulled into formation, rifles angled low but ready. I couldn't tear my gaze away. One of the figures tilted its head slightly, like a dog hearing a sound far away. Then all at once they vanished. No running, no hiding, just gone. "Thermal?" Collins barked. "Negative," Harris said, staring through the scope. "Nothing?" "Nothing at all." We searched the area, combed every inch of that playground, but there were no footprints, no signs anyone had stood there. Just dust, empty and endless. That night back at base, no one spoke during dinner. The silence was its own kind of admission. We had all seen them. We couldn't call it dust or nerves anymore. It was real. Later, I found Diaz sitting alone on the rooftop, smoking. His eyes were hollow, his hands shaking. "They're kids," he said quietly. "The ones who died when the bombs hit. That's why they watch us. We brought this on them." I tried to reason with him. "You don't know that. War leaves ruins, that's all. Places look different when they're empty." But even as I said it, the words felt thin. He shook his head. "I can hear them. In my dreams. They whisper." The next few patrols, we tried to bury what we'd seen under routine. Keep rifles clean. Keep vehicles fueled. Keep minds locked on the mission. But the desert didn't let us. One night, while on guard duty, I heard footsteps behind me on the rooftop. Heavy boots crunching on gravel. I turned, expecting to see Collins or Harris, but there was no one. Just the glow of the moon on the sandbags and the long shadows of the antenna swaying in the breeze. The footsteps came again, closer this time. My pulse spiked, and I flicked my safety off. "Who's there?" I whispered. Silence. Then, just at the edge of hearing, a child's laugh. High, sharp, echoing from the stairwell. I didn't move for the rest of my shift. The next morning, Collins called us together. He didn't mention what we were all feeling, but his jaw was tight. "Orders came down. Another sweep tomorrow. Different sector. Government complex north of here. Intel says it's abandoned, but keep sharp. Insurgents have been using places like this to hide caches." Diaz muttered. "Not just insurgents." Collins ignored him, but we all heard it. When we reached the complex the following day, the air was different. Heavy. The kind of heat that pressed on your chest and slowed your steps. The building loomed over us, 5 stories tall, windows shattered, the facade scarred with bullet marks. We entered carefully, clearing room by room. Inside, the hallway smelled of mildew and something sweet and rotten, like fruit left too long in the sun. Files littered the floor, paper crumbling at our boots. In one office, I found a portrait of Saddam Hussein hanging crooked on the wall, its glass shattered. Someone had scratched out the eyes. Harris came over the radio. "You guys hearing that?" At first, I thought he meant static, but then I realized it was humming, a low, steady hum, like a song sung through closed lips. It echoed faintly through the building, coming from no direction and every direction at once. We regrouped near a stairwell. The sound was clearer there, almost melodic, like a lullaby. Diaz's face was pale. "That's it. That's what I hear in my dreams." Collins signaled for silence. We advanced slowly up the stairs, rifles ready. The humming grew louder, weaving between the walls. When we reached the 3rd floor, the sound stopped. Dead silence. Then the lights flickered. Not the whole building, just the bulbs in the hallway we stood in. One by one, they buzzed and flared, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. "Fall back," Collins ordered. But before we could move, the doors lining the hallway slammed shut. All of them. Bang, 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 down the line. Diaz dropped his rifle, clutching his head. "Stop it! Stop it!" he screamed. We dragged him back toward the stairwell, boots slipping on the dusty floor. The humming returned, louder, angrier now, vibrating through the walls. My teeth ached with it. When we finally burst outside, Diaz collapsed on the ground, gasping. The sound cut off instantly. The desert was silent again. We never reported what happened. Collins filed it as structural instability and psychological stress. But we all knew better. That building wasn't abandoned. Something lived in its walls, and it had let us know we weren't welcome. That night, Diaz wouldn't sleep. He sat rocking in his bunk, whispering to himself. I caught fragments. She's here. The woman with no eyes, watching. I tried to tell him it was just dreams, but my own dreams had started to rot. I woke drenched in sweat, hearing whispers I couldn't understand, seeing faces half-formed in the dark. The war was supposed to be against flesh and blood, but now it felt like the desert itself had risen to fight us. And we were losing. It was late October when everything broke open. By then, the whispers and shadows had become part of our days, like the sun and the dust. We didn't talk about them anymore, not because they stopped, but because acknowledging them made it worse. But the desert wasn't done with us. We were assigned to escort an Army engineer unit tasked with clearing an old drainage tunnel system outside Fallujah. Insurgents had been known to hide explosives in tunnels, so the mission seemed straightforward: secure the perimeter while the engineers did their job. Still, none of us liked the order. The tunnels were said to be centuries old, carved deep into the ground long before any modern war. Locals avoided them. Some called them the mouths of the dead. The entrance yawned out of a hillside, bricks blackened and crumbling. The air that drifted from inside was colder than the desert wind. Too cold. Diaz whispered, "Feels like a grave." Collins snapped at him to keep quiet, but his own voice wavered. The engineers moved cautiously, flashlights cutting pale circles through the dark. We followed a short way in, rifles raised, boots crunching on loose stone. The walls were slick with moisture, carved symbols faint under the grime. Not Arabic, not anything we recognized. Probably old tribal markings, Harris muttered, though he didn't sound convinced. The deeper we went, the stronger the smell became. Iron and rot, like rusted metal soaked in blood. My stomach churned, but I pressed on, staying close behind Collins. About 50 meters in, we reached a junction where the tunnel split. The engineers paused, debating which path to survey first. That's when Diaz pointed, hand trembling. Look. In the beam of his flashlight, at the far end of the left tunnel, stood a figure, a woman. Her dress was tattered, hanging loose around her thin frame. Her face was pale, almost glowing, and where her eyes should have been, empty sockets. We froze. No one breathed. "Identify yourself!" Collins shouted, his voice echoing hard against the stone. The woman didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there, her head tilting ever so slightly. Then the humming started again. The same melody from the government complex, low, vibrating, filling the tunnel until it felt like the walls themselves were singing. Diaz screamed and fired, bullets sparking against stone. The woman didn't flinch. She didn't bleed. She simply faded, like smoke caught in the beam of our lights, until she was gone. "Cease fire!" Collins roared, dragging Diaz back by the collar. But it was too late. The engineers wanted out, and truth be told, so did we. We backed out of those tunnels fast, the humming still vibrating in our bones. Back outside under the burning sun, Diaz collapsed on the sand. "She's following me," he gasped. "I see her every night." She waits at the edge of my bed. We evacuated him to the medics, who labeled it a stress breakdown. But the rest of us knew it was more than that. We had all seen her. That night something changed in the air at the base. The dogs that usually barked through the alleys were silent. Radios flickered with static even when powered off. My notebook, the one I carried everywhere, fell open on its own while I was writing. Across the page, in handwriting that wasn't mine, was a single word: stay. I sat there for hours, staring at it, unable to convince myself I hadn't done it in some half-asleep haze. But deep down, I knew the truth. The desert had stopped waiting. It was moving toward us now, step by step, and it had chosen Diaz first. Sleep became a stranger to us after the tunnel incident. Even when our eyes closed, the silence pressed too heavy, and the dreams that came were filled with the same images. The eyeless woman, the children by the swings, the humming that seemed to rise from the earth itself. Some nights I woke drenched in sweat, convinced someone was standing at the foot of my bunk. Diaz never came back to the squad. He was evacuated to Baghdad, and rumor was he'd been flown out of country for psychiatric treatment. Before he left, he clutched my arm so hard his nails drew blood. His voice was a rasp. "Don't follow her. Don't ever follow her." Those words stuck with me like shrapnel. But the war didn't stop for ghosts. Orders came down: secure a block of abandoned apartments suspected of housing weapons. It was standard work on paper. We'd done dozens of sweeps like it, but none of us wanted to go. Collins didn't show it, but his silence on the ride in told me he felt it too. The complex rose out of the dust like a ruin. Windows gaped like empty sockets. Laundry lines still sagged between balconies, the clothes stiff and sun-bleached, unmoved by the wind. We cleared the first two buildings without incident. Just rubble, broken furniture, scraps of lives interrupted. It was in the third building that the air changed. Thick, cold. Every breath felt like it carried grit, but the desert outside was scorching. We moved up a stairwell littered with debris, the light barely reaching through the broken roof. At the landing, Harris froze. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. On the wall, written in what looked like dried blood, were words in English. "We are still here." My skin went ice cold. Collins barked for us to keep moving, but his voice cracked on the last syllable. We entered the top floor. The rooms were gutted, walls collapsed, but in one corner, against a half-standing wall, sat a child's crib. Rocking gently, back and forth, back and forth. There was no wind. No one touched it. No one even breathed too loud. Then Harris swore and pointed, because inside the crib was a small doll. Its porcelain face was cracked, its eyes gouged out. And though no one was near it, the doll's head turned, slowly, deliberately, toward us. That broke us. We swept out fast, weapons raised though none of us dared fire. On the stairwell, I swear I heard footsteps above us, running, quick and light, like children chasing one another. But when I looked up, the landing was empty. Back outside under the harsh daylight, we regrouped by the vehicles. Everyone was pale, jaws clenched tight. Harris crossed himself. "This place ain't right." "They're not letting us leave." Collins shoved him. "Cut it." We finished the sweep, we report it clean, and we never speak of this again. But even he didn't believe it. That night we heard the humming again. Not faint this time, not buried in static or distance. It was clear, almost like it was coming from inside our own building. It seeped through the walls, wrapped around us like a fog. The generator died at exactly midnight. Everything went black. The only sound was the humming, louder, layered now, as if dozens of voices sang together, deep and high, male and female, adult and child. Flashlights clicked on, beams cutting across the room. For a split second in the corner, I saw them. Dozens of pale faces, eyes hollow, mouths moving with the song. When the light hit them, they vanished. Collins shouted for a perimeter, but no one moved. We were frozen, because at that moment, we heard boots moving across the roof. Heavy, deliberate, pacing back and forth. Then came the laughter. Not cruel, not mocking, just wrong. Like children at play, but stretched, distorted, echoing through the building until it rattled in our bones. Harris finally snapped, firing a burst into the ceiling. The gunfire lit the room like lightning, deafening in the enclosed space. When the echo faded, the laughter stopped. The humming stopped. Silence, but we all knew it wasn't gone. It was waiting. Collins lowered his rifle, sweat pouring down his face. "We're pulling out tomorrow. First light. I don't care what command says." None of us argued. For once, no one mentioned orders or duty. We just sat there in the dark, waiting for morning that felt like it would never come. When dawn finally broke, the sky over Fallujah was red with dust. And though the sun rose, none of us felt warmth. It was as if the desert itself was watching, waiting for the next step. Because deep down, we knew the truth. We weren't leaving. Not really. Something out there had already claimed us. The morning we tried to pull out, the desert refused to let us go. The convoy lined up just after sunrise, 4 Humvees idling at the gate. The air shimmered with heat, though the day had only just begun. Dust blew in from the west, veiling the horizon in a red haze. It felt wrong. Too early for a storm, too thick to see through. Collins gave the order and we rolled out. The engines growled, tires crunching over gravel, each man silent inside his own thoughts. No one cracked jokes, no one chewed gum or muttered under breath like usual. We were all waiting for it, for something. We hadn't made it half a mile before the radios crackled. Not voices, not static, but the same humming. Clear, low, threaded with 1,000 tones. I tore my headset off, but the sound was still there, vibrating inside my skull. Then the lead vehicle braked hard. I slammed against the seat in front of me as we screeched to a halt. "What the hell is going on up there?" Collins barked into the mic. The reply came in a broken whisper. "They're on the road." We leaned out the windows, and sure enough, there they were. Dozens of figures lined across the street. Men, women, children. A wall of pale, hollow faces, eyes empty sockets, mouths moving in silence. The same figures we'd seen before, only now there were too many to count. Harris cursed under his breath. "They're waiting for us." Collins gritted his teeth, grabbed the radio. "Punch through. Drive. Now." The lead Humvee accelerated. Dust kicked up, the figures looming larger with every second. For a heartbeat, I thought maybe they'd vanish again. But they didn't. The Humvee plowed into them. Only there was no impact, no resistance. The vehicle passed through like they were smoke. But the driver screamed, slamming on the brakes, because inside the cabin with him, in every seat, were faces, pressed against the glass, screaming without sound. The Humvee swerved, flipped on its side with a shriek of tearing metal. Flames spat from the engine. We piled out of our vehicles, weapons up. The figures swarmed around us, flickering in and out of sight. One moment they were across the street, the next they were inches away, their eyeless sockets locked on ours. I fired. Harris fired. Bullets ripped the air, but nothing hit. The shapes dissolved and reformed. Closer, always closer. Then the voices came. Not the humming this time. Words. Thousands of whispers overlapping, bleeding into one another. Some in Arabic, some in English, some in languages I'd never heard. My ears rang, but the voices were inside my head, tearing at my thoughts. "You took our lives. You filled the ground with blood. You do not leave." Diaz's warning echoed in my skull. "Don't follow her." I turned, and there she was, the woman from the tunnels, her dress in tatters, her face pale as ash, her empty sockets bleeding black tears. She raised her hand and pointed at me. The ground shook, a low rumble deep as thunder. Cracks split the pavement, dust spraying upward. The voices grew louder, a storm of rage. "Fall back!" Collins shouted. "Fall back now!" We tried, but the desert itself fought us. The air thickened, heavy as water, every step like running through mud. Harris tripped, scrambling on his hands and knees, and something seized him. Hands, dozens of them, pale and thin, rising from the sand to drag him down. He screamed, clawing, but the earth swallowed him to the chest before we could reach him. I grabbed his arm, pulling with all I had. His eyes met mine, wide, bloodshot, begging. Then his face twisted in horror, and he shouted, "Behind you!" I turned, and the eyeless woman was inches away. Her mouth opened, impossibly wide, the humming pouring out like a physical force. My vision blurred. My grip on Harris slipped. In another second, he was gone. Dragged beneath the earth, his scream cut off like a switch had been flipped. We stumbled back toward the overturned Humvee, flames licking higher. The figures closed in, circling, their whispers rising to a fever pitch. Collins fired burst after burst, yelling like he could drown them out, but his voice was swallowed whole. Then, silence. Every figure froze. The humming stopped. The desert went still. And one voice, clear and sharp, spoke from nowhere and everywhere at once. "You are ours." The ground split beneath the overturned Humvee, swallowing it whole in a roar of fire and sand. We were thrown off our feet, dirt and smoke filling the air. When I scrambled up, coughing, the figures were gone. Just dust, just dessert. But Harris was gone too, and the lead Humvee, and part of me. We dragged ourselves back to base in silence, 3 vehicles where there had been 4. Collins didn't speak the whole ride. His hands never left the wheel, knuckles white as bone. That night, none of us slept. We sat in the dark, rifles across our laps, listening to every creak of the building. The humming never came, but we knew it wasn't over. Because once you see the dead walking in daylight, you know the night will only be worse, and the woman would return. When dawn finally came, it did not feel like salvation. The light bled weakly through the dusty windows of our outpost, painting the walls a sickly orange. We sat there, hollow-eyed and silent, each man clutching his rifle like a lifeline. No one dared mention Harris, though every one of us saw him dragged into the earth. His absence was a weight that pressed on the air heavier than the heat. Collins was the first to break the silence. He stood, voice hoarse, and said, "We don't talk about this. Not to command, not to anyone. Harris is KIA, ambush, that's all." We didn't argue. In war, truth bends until it breaks. But what haunted us couldn't be written in any report. Command wanted numbers, not nightmares. Later that morning, we gathered what was left of Harris's gear. His helmet still carried a streak of dust from where my hand had slipped. His notebook was tucked in his pack, pages blank. I stared at it for too long, remembering the way his eyes looked in those final seconds. Not fear of death, he'd seen enough of that, but fear of something beyond it. Diaz had warned us, and Harris had paid the price. That day, we were ordered back out on patrol. Collins pushed back, hard, but it didn't matter. Higher command only saw what they called operational necessity. We rolled out again, each of us quiet, carrying ghosts heavier than our packs. On the road, I kept catching glimpses in the side mirrors, a figure just out of focus, sometimes on rooftops, sometimes in alleys, always still, always watching. When I turned my head, nothing was there. Back at the outpost, things worsened. Radios cut in with whispers, voices we recognized, Harris's among them. "Don't leave me," it said once, clear as day. Collins smashed the set with the butt of his rifle, but we still heard him, faint in the static. The night stretched long. Men started refusing sleep, afraid of what dreams would bring. Harris appeared in mine often, half-buried, mouth full of sand, pointing at me with broken fingers. The eyeless woman stood behind him, humming softly, her song a lullaby for the damned. One night, Torres, the quietest man in our squad, walked outside the wire without a word. By the time we noticed, it was too late. His rifle lay on the ground, his helmet abandoned. We searched the desert until sunrise, but he was gone. No footprints, no trace, just gone. Collins stopped shaving. His face grew ragged, his eyes red. He carried a look I hadn't seen before, like a man who knew the war he was fighting wasn't the one he'd been sent to. "We're not soldiers anymore," he muttered once, sitting beside me in the dark. "We're bait." Weeks dragged on. Missions came and went, but the shadows followed. Some nights were quiet, almost normal. Other nights, the humming returned, rattling windows, shaking walls. And always, always we felt the eyes. When our deployment finally ended, they pulled us out of Fallujah. New units rotated in, fresh faces who laughed too loudly, unaware of what waited for them. We said nothing. None of us could. What good would it do? Who would believe it? I carried Harris's helmet back with me, though command never asked for it. It sits in a box in my garage now, years later, gathering dust. Some nights I hear something scratching at it, faint but steady, as if trying to claw its way back into the world. The war ended for us on paper, but not in truth. Not in our heads, not in our bones. Because when you've seen the desert peel back its skin and show you what lies beneath, you don't come home. Not really. A part of you stays there, buried with the dead who never left. And sometimes when the house is quiet, I hear the humming again. Years have passed since Iraq, but the war has never left me. The battles, the ambushes, the convoys, those memories fade at the edges, dulled by time. But not the other things. Not the humming, Not the faces, not the woman with the empty eyes. Those remain sharp, sharper than any wound I ever carried home. People ask about the war sometimes. They want stories they can fit neatly into history books about tactics, firefights, victories, losses. They nod politely when I talk about sandstorms or chow halls or patrols gone sideways. But I never tell them the truth. How could I? Who would believe me if I said the desert itself was alive, that it watched us, judged us, and took some of us for its own? I see Harris in dreams, sometimes Diaz too, though I know he survived. Harris always looks the same, half-buried, mouth open in a scream I can't hear, reaching for me with hands I can't grab. Behind him, the woman stands, still humming her song. Every time just before I wake, she turns her head toward me, and I feel her gaze even without eyes. I thought leaving Iraq would end it, that coming home would break whatever tether held me there. But the first time I lay in my own bed, in the quiet of my own house, I heard it again, the faint sound of humming, like it was seeping through the walls. It hasn't stopped. Maybe the desert doesn't let go. Maybe some wars never end. Maybe what we saw wasn't bound to a place, but to us, carried back like a sickness in the blood. I don't know. What I do know is this. When you stand in a land soaked in centuries of death, you are never alone. The living fight their battles in daylight, but the dead wait for night. And sometimes, if you listen closely enough, you'll hear them too. The humming, the voices, the promise that what we carried home will one day come for us all. You're still watching without subscribing? Fix it now. Subscribe, the next story's coming. And in the comments, share your country and the time you're watching this.